Okay, hi everyone. I'm Edwin Rutsch, the director of the Empathy Center, and our mission is to make mutual empathy a primary cultural value. And today we're here with Kevin Waldman. If you'd like to introduce yourself and kind of lead the discussion, since you had wanted to had some topics you wanted to talk about with around empathy. I'll just add that we did have a previous conversation about your article which was in the Chicago Tribune. It was called The Dangerous Consequences of Radical Empathy Unchecked by Reason. And there is a video out there about that discussion as a sort of a follow-up.
Yeah, hi. So I guess to introduce myself just briefly. So I started uh learning about empathy through these buzzwords like radical empathy, which I know is a buzzword. But I did use it to write an article in the Chicago Tribune. Um, and this is how we started talking about this topic, which I've learned quite a bit about since April when I wrote the piece. I would like to write another piece uh, to kind of follow up what I've learned since then regarding empathy. And so there's such a lack of empathy, and it's masqueraded as empathy. That's why I use the term radical empathy. So what I want to talk about, so I'm a graduate student at Northwestern, but I also have my own lab called Form Research at psychform.com. Um, and we do private independent research outside of Northwestern, so they're not related. Although we do use our cohort usually starts at Northwestern, and we'll continue to be doing that for the next year. Now, so we just get a lot of information on students, and I think that there is a very major disconnect between regarding empathy. Um, from reality versus what they believe is empathy on campus, and it's being taught by adults very incorrectly. And it's resulting in a national crisis, in my opinion. And that might sound dramatic, but I do believe we're there. I mean, look what's happening on these campuses right now. And so I think I do a lot of work in gender research, and I'm also gay, and I so my pretty much my social and professional life is centered around LGBT. And so I think I'm pretty well versed in this to know that I think some of what we're seeing with trans violence is the result of this lack of empathy masquerading as empathy. And so I call it radical. I know that you don't like that term, and I respect that. I actually wish we should have a better term than that, but it's you know what I'm saying though, what I'm talking about when I use the
Yeah.
buzzword. And so, which by the way, I've read a couple of the things that you told me about, and I don't like what I read either with radical empathy and the far right. I'm more of a middle grounded, just trying to come up with an actual solution type of person. And
Mm.
so when you see people committing crimes and then screaming and they really mean it, that they're committing the crime against the person that has no empathy, um, it's sad when you know that the person doesn't even understand what empathy is in the first place. So how did we even get to that point is my question. And what do we do to resolve it? And so, not to keep rambling on, but I do want to do your idea with an empathy circle at Northwestern this fall. I'm actually going to research how to do this, which is it's not going to be that difficult. I want to get together conservative students and liberal students and have them do empathy circles on campus. This is something I'm very determined to do now after what happened with Charlie Kirk. And I'm even nervous to do that, but I still think something has to happen where we're having these conversations. And if you want to talk about, I know your audience knows all about the empathy circles, but um, I'm determined that this is. I'm circling back to you because I believe this is part of the solution, is what you taught me about this, and I think we should talk more about it.
Yeah, that's great. I did send you, I mean, there's so much confusion about what the term empathy means, and I'm grounding, my understanding of it in the work of Carl Rogers. So, I mean, if you're studying psychology, he was really, as a clinical psychologist, he was, one of the top two or three clinical psychologists he's always mentioned. And he developed the active listening or empathic listening process with his clients. And we've just sort of built on that, taking it from kind of a client therapist approach where the therapist just listens kind of non-judgmentally to the client, to making it mutual so that we call that an empathy circle. So we have small groups, everyone gets a chance to speak. They select who they're going to speak to. The listener reflects back their understanding, and we have timed, limits for speaking, and then the listener becomes the speaker, and they select someone to speak to. And that core for me is what empathy is in a practice, and it's immensely effective. I mean, I had sent you material about how we did go to political rallies and did empathy circles there with conservatives and liberals. On one side of the street, they're screaming and yelling at each other, and in the
Yeah.
empathy tent, they're listening to each other and they're giving each other hugs afterwards, because people do want to connect ultimately, I find. So, yeah, it's a bit of a mess now with the definitions, and, I'm trying to work on that too. Just did a presentation on what I call holistic empathy to take it out of the individualistic term, like one person listens and the other, everybody else speaks and you don't get heard. But it's really mutual. We want to both, just like we're here, we both want to listen to each other and hear each other and understand each other. And I think that's the core of what empathy is, and being sensitive to the felt experience of what people are feeling and thinking. It's kind of the whole person, hearing the whole person, not just intellectually, just intellectually, but you're really deeply hearing each other.
I think one thing that I'm personally struggling with, even professionally and personally. So professionally, I'm getting my license to be a therapist. Um, and so, one of the things at Northwestern that we learn about, it's this like affirmation first or affirmation only, just constant empathy. And I wonder like, and then just to kind of tie that into my own personal life, like everything, there's so many polarizing things going on right now in America. And um, it's tough for people to even have friendships unless they all agree. I personally have most of my friends and I disagree on many things, but I'm used to that. I don't, and I just don't understand how it's so tough for people. Just yesterday, I was talking to another gay friend of mine who about the Charlie Kirk thing, and his he believes Kirk should be dead because he had no empathy. And it's like, but my question is, how do I even communicate with this person? Because I'm trying to explain to this is an acquaintance of mine, not a close friend, who was saying this. And I was trying to explain, you don't understand what empathy is. And then they think I'm also, lacking empathy because he was saying I was stoic. And I'm not trying to get like my personal life involved in this conversation, but what I'm saying is it's a very realistic example where you have somebody who is very miserable and extremely determined um, to have these views that are oppressor versus oppressed. And they're always saying that empathy is the reason that they came to this conclusion.
Mm.
The person that's oppressing me has no empathy for me, or the person that and I'm trying to explain that with empathy, and I've read quite a bit about this as well. And also my approach therapeutically is there have to be boundaries with the way you think for somebody. Like my ability to understand how you feel has a limit. I'm not you. And I also have a very different perspective. And bias is also a part of it. We're allowed to still have bias and then be empathetic. And I think that we're teaching young people right now that that's not the case. That there's an unbiased mind that is required for empathy. And I just don't agree with that. And I think that we're losing track of what it really means to be empathetic because of politics in a way. And so these conversations have been difficult. And this is the first time in my life where like, I just can't even hang out with I can't be around certain things because I feel like I can't help them anymore. Like do you ever feel like in your career that we've gotten to a point now where like these younger people, I feel like they've been bit by this oppression bug or
Hmm.
victimization so young now that like it used to hit in college. And then you still were developmentally able to kind of figure out and end up on the other side, most people having a normal adulthood, where now I'm seeing, they're starting in elementary school teaching this empathy narrative that isn't accurate. And
Do
so
they actually use the word empathy? I haven't seen, I hear that there's a social justice woke, but I haven't heard a lot of talk about empathy in that community. I don't know if that's just projecting the word empathy into there, but I haven't heard them use the word empathy a
Well,
lot.
so I not my expertise is not in K through 12, like not in
Hmm.
adolescence. I'm generalizing, and I can get that information. I am partnering with some K through 12 researchers in the next couple months. But for me, I mean, even like what we're learning at Northwestern, it is the empathy is used in every class, no matter
Oh,
what the
really? Okay.
oh, everything, yeah.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that.
what they're talking about empathy. And I try and I'm there to learn. I keep my mouth
Hmm.
shut. For the most part, I'm pretty I'm not the professor in this case. So, but it just seems it doesn't seem productive to me to
Hmm.
use this buzzword to create, I believe, chaos, or more depression, more anxiety, especially anxiety. And an inability to really be around somebody that disagrees with you and still appreciate and value that person for their own perspective. And you, especially like in my experience at Northwestern, the word empathy is used in most of these conversations. And
Hmm.
I just feel this is why I want to bring
Hmm.
your concept to the campus because I want to show people what it actually means to be
Right.
empathetic,
Yeah.
not talking about it, but
Hmm.
actually have the
Doing
conversation.
it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot there. The first part is about therapy that I do see that as a problem in the therapeutic. You know what Rogers did, just listening to the client,
yeah.
because that's not whole. I'm starting to use the term holistic empathy now because the first part is the academia has not helped a lot. In fact, they've really muddied the water with the definitions.
Yeah,
So, Roger's definition was pretty clear. It's like you're listening to someone, you're listening to the wholeness of who they are. You're kind of a companion on their inner journey. Uh, and he did it in a therapeutic context, but he would just listen to someone for an hour and then they'd leave. And for me, a real holistic empathy is mutual.
hmm,
So the person who's the client is not learning empathy skills on how to listen to others and learning empathy skills that they can take home to their family. And I think that that's a real problem with therapy
yeah,
itself, that it's one direction. And
yeah.
empathy, it's not holistic empathy, it's fractional empathy.
Huh.
So holistic empathy is the relationship and it's the mutuality, and the empathy circle models that because it has boundaries. Conservatives talk about boundaries. I totally agree about
Yeah,
boundaries. It's not the unendingly listen to someone else.
yeah,
It's like you listen to them, and the intention is to bring them into a mutually empathic relationship.
yeah.
So I will listen. You want to listen to your friend, but you want your friend to be there to listen to
Right,
you,
right.
and that you have a back and forth. And that's what the empathy circle supports, is instead of hearing something from the other person and just jumping in, you have to reflect back your understanding of what you've
Right,
heard. And the
right.
intention is for them to feel heard, but for you to feel heard as well. And then it creates this dialogic back and forth. And that's where, with the mediation that we've done, people start really hearing each other and they say, oh, you're really willing to. And a lot of the problem is people aren't willing to listen to each other. So you
Right.
just appreciate the other person even listening to the other, and that almost like it solves half of the problems,
Yeah.
just the listening to each other.
Yeah, I think that couple things. One is I've actually learned as someone as a therapist how different listening actually is in reality when you're trying to hear somebody out. Because I've had this whole other life and career before this where that was never part of it, part of my obligation or responsibilities. And so having to learn that in adulthood, obviously I possess these things naturally to a degree, but to really listen to somebody, it took me patience and failing at it actually, and it makes me realize this is a part of what's happening right now. We aren't. No one understands. Not no one. I'm many people that are experiencing um, the issues psychologically and are also tying their perspective to empathy. I think that they're incapable in many cases of really listening to somebody without thinking what they're going to say next. And this is something like I've had to learn as well myself on how to do so I understand. See, I have empathy for these people, but to a degree, and then I'm just done with it because I think it's been weaponized also in a way, this word, where, if someone disagrees, especially just currently it's about politics. So let's just use that as an example, where if they disagree with something that's happened that really affects you, but they don't want to hear you, they'll claim you don't have no empathy for them. And I'm generalizing again, but I'm saying this is something that I'm like, but they've been taught this. That's the
Hmm.
problem. We are taught this. I recently had a conversation with a woman at school. We were learning about empathy and gender, or excuse me, and LGBT. And in the class there was a heated debate. I did chime in because I am gay, and they were talking about gay people. And it turned out like this girl, this woman truly believes that her perspective isn't one of empathy, and it is not. It is of hardcore sympathy or just pure pity for gay people. And I was explaining to her this boundary that no one really talks about at my program at Northwestern, where it's time to listen.
Hmm.
You you think that empathy is an act. It is in a way, but it's also you have to let this person explain their life to you so then you can understand what it is that you're supposed to be empathetic towards. And so the conversation was a really big just a good example in my head of something that because the professor was validating this woman and also said I wasn't being empathetic. I just thought the whole thing
He
was
said you
silly.
weren't empathic.
Correct.
Oh
Empathic.
boy.
Sorry. Empathic. And so, yeah, she did say this. And I took it as a learning experience. I found value in the whole thing. I was upset because I believe, I mean, in this case, I was right, and they weren't understanding. They're teaching that my perspective to have a boundary regarding empathy is toxic for a client or a patient in therapy. And this is one class. I am not saying
Hmm.
every professor at Northwestern is doing this, but I am saying I've run into situations like this a number of times where I find it concerning. And so this is why I'd like to actively bring students in a room
Hmm.
to do some of this together where it's physically listening and then explaining. And I think you were telling me you have the volunteers not just listen, but then explain what I just heard you say and what you're.
Yeah, you reflect back. It's just like in Rogerian active listening. You do hear the person non-judgmentally. It's like I hear for example, I hear your experience was in a classroom that that one of the students was uh, um, kind of saying what she thought your experience was, and then you were trying to explain. I wasn't quite clear that wasn't accurate that she was saying, or you're showing a different approach, and then the teacher kind of said you weren't being empathic. So
Right, right.
I'm trying to reflect back as best I could, which is not too good at
Yeah,
that
yeah.
point. What was happening, your experience. So I'm listening to you and trying to have you feel understood to your satisfaction.
Um, yeah. And I just feel like more this it has to be acted out at this point for this to catch on
Hmm.
because and it's crazy that whole the article that made me you and I meet has led to so many things. I heard from a number of professionals in mental health that I you should meet them too because I believe that the only solution is what we're talking about, the circles, because
Hmm.
we're not getting it, myself included. I will learn a lot from that experience. Granted, I want to learn. That's the difference. There are
Hmm.
people how do we get understand that this buzzword, which unfortunately, empathy, I almost wish we could come up with another word and like a movement or something,
Hmm.
because this has been beaten down uh, in such a opposite direction of what it really is. Um, that I hope we can save it at this
Yeah.
point. I know you believe that you can, and I hope so. I mean, I'm sure we can. I'm just saying I want to be more of a part of it because, especially with what I'm learning, like to be licensed in the state of Illinois as a therapist, empathy is nothing more than a buzzword that's not accurate, in my opinion, one bit, because it's a cosplay. What buzz it's not necessarily listening, it's more acting out. So people
Hmm.
are now thinking that if you're empathic, sorry, if you're empathic, it's it's like how you behave instead of how you interpret and listen.
Hmm.
And I don't like that because I think it's wrong.
It's like they're defining empathy as sort of supporting the person and whatever they're.
Yeah, so to be
It's like it's whatever you
empathic,
say is accurate and
yeah.
and supported.
Yes.
Is that
And
sort of how they're defining it, or would you
well,
say what's the core of how they're defining it?
and like I said, I'm generalizing because there's great, wonderful people who get it. But I'm saying in what I'm seeing in this other category of people where I feel like they're using the word empathy incorrectly or as a reason to feel X, Y, and Z that's going to hold them back in life. Um, they believe being empathic is what I mean is they believe being empathic is an action. Like I'm going to go do this because I have empathy
Oh,
for this person,
mm-hmm.
other than just having empathy and then
Oh, uh-huh. I'm
in a way.
going to demonstrate for
Yeah,
the Palestinians or something. I'm going to take action on at a rally or a
yeah,
protest or something. I'm going to take this action in support
yeah,
of, and that's like empathy. Yeah, for me, if we were talking about Palestinian Israeli, for me, the empathy would be to listen to both sides
yeah,
and then to support both sides in coming together to listen to each other in like and so the empathy circle is sort of the minimal viable process. It's sort of the minimal kind of a structure that kind of holds the underlying values
yeah,
to it. And yeah, so that's and I've seen that too. When we went to demonstrations here at Berkeley, I would ask, the sort of the woke, crowd of social justice folk, what is empathy? They say, well, I have empathy for the poor or something like that. And I don't have
yeah,
empathy for, it was the right wing that was there. And, for me, the empathy would be is to have empathy for the other side, have
right,
empathy.
yeah,
And that's
that,
the same experience with we had the political right would come to Berkeley, and then the left would counter demonstrate Antifa and so forth. They'd have these knockdown, drag out fights. And we were there, only like five of us, with the empathy tent, being willing to listen to both sides. So for me, if the progressives were really valuing empathy, they would have gone to these demonstrations, set up empathy tent, and said, "Hey, come, conservatives, let us listen to you and let's have a dialogue." So I actually see there's sort of a lack of there's the two sides are sort of mirrors, authoritarian mirrors of each other,
yeah,
and
absolutely. Yeah.
um, and so the empathy is sort of the way. There's a very few people holding the presence of listening to both sides and trying to mediate through empathy both sides. Now the conservatives are kind of on a rant against empathy because I guess because how maybe it's been used by a lot of the woke left or something. Yeah.
Well, I think that two things. One, the Palestinian thing is a really good example of like a hard. I mean, you really want to put your money where your mouth is for someone like me who clearly is one-sided on this. It's I really would I should use that as an example. It's funny because like we as I've gone to my so I'm Jewish. I think you know that. And
Hmm.
I told my father certain things about what I'm working on professionally, and we're going to be doing some surveys on campus asking students about, the Middle East. And so um, my dad was telling me, you really have to think about both sides before you start doing this. And in the moment, I tell myself I'll be fine, but it actually really is hard for me, um, because I'm human. I'm human, so that's the thing. Like I think that when I see if I actually know about that the like a geopolitical issue that's ruining certain parts of American society in terms of being able to have dialogue, I think you have to put this is a great example about empathy because I have to put all of my bias aside for this, even though I do possess it. So I have to try and think, okay, take all those people that are yelling and screaming about the wrong thing out and actually think about the issue at hand. And so I think that's a good example of because it's challenging. It would be very challenging for me even to do that. And I do this like I'm starting to do this for a living now.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, it's you said set your biases aside. Another way of looking at it is to bring your empathy forward.
Okay.
You
Yeah,
know, it's
I like
like, I'm bringing my empathy forward to listen, and it doesn't mean I give up all the, you know, feelings, concerns, thoughts, that I have, but I'm willing to listen to you to begin with the intention that you will then listen to me, and
yeah.
then it becomes a mutual dialogue. And it's sort of, can we have that empathic space between us is sort of a common ground with
Yeah.
the hope, or that through this dialogue we will be able to come to some mutual understanding and maybe even come up with processes, strategies, for problem solving out of that.
How how does it make you feel as someone who's one of your major life goals is spreading this message? So how does it make you feel when you see, I mean, have you been exposed to any of these people that are on social media who are saying horrible things about people that they disagree with and then using empathy as the reason why they are saying these terrible things, saying this person has no empathy, they deserve to be dead, or this person has no empathy, when really they don't have empathy, the person saying it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how, because this is getting to me, and colleagues of mine as well. It's very hard to ignore right now that people are saying vicious things um, and then using this word to justify it. I have empathy and this person doesn't, when
Hmm.
really they don't. So I know I'm kind of going in circles, but how does that,
Yeah, yeah. Like, how
when you
does it
see
feel
that?
when people are doing that, when they're saying they have empathy and others don't? Uh, what I try to do is bring it into the empathy circle so that we can structurally. It's sort of like empathy circles are sort of like training wheels,
Yeah,
for empathy. It's like sort of the minimal viable, process. And I try to bring people into the empathy circle to slow the conversation down. I want to hear what they have to say, but I want them to hear what I have to say. And I've invited, all those the critics, the conservative critics, God Sad, Joe Wrigley, Sin of Empathy, Ali Stuckey, and even and Paul Bloom, I said, hey, let's have a recorded dialogue like this. They won't do it. They will, I and they have all kinds of, reasons like I don't have time, or we don't trust you, or you don't have good faith. And there's all kinds of things to dismiss having a discussion and a dialogue. So, and I was glad that you took part, so I was
Yeah,
like,
well,
I thought that was really great. I mean, a few people do take part, and, so I was really glad that you were willing to sit down and talk.
oh no, I mean, I'm so glad that you, because I know we disagreed when you messaged me initially about my
Hmm.
piece, but I got a lot out of that because I'm realizing you're totally right about why you messaged me. And it doesn't mean I'm wrong. It just means we need to highlight why, when I wrote that piece and used radical empathy, it should have been in the first paragraph explained that I was using a buzzword on purpose and why, what the term actually means. Um, and so that was a good learning experience, professionally, especially. So, um, I think that a lot of these people, I'm actually meeting I've had some things get published, and now I've been in contact with a couple of these well-known, more conservatives, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes because this is also a business. Mental health is a business now, and I mean it always has been, but it's with social media, it's people are afraid to be connected to those that they don't align with because their following might, go away.
Right.
And we have very little privacy. So I mean, I do, but I'm a nobody. But so when I think that that's probably part of it, because I mean, what is there to lose with having a conversation like this? I think it's been really helpful for me.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I would love to. I just see that the mutual empathy, the way that we're defining it, or the holistic empathy, I've had the experience that it helps bridge the divide. I've just seen it in going to the demonstrations. I had really good connections with the conservatives. They'd come in, talk, and they were actually, I found, they were more open to dialogue at that time than the left was. Uh, so, uh,
Yeah, that
so
makes
I'm kind of surprised at at the turn that it's taken, with conservatives, being so critical of empathy. Even, Charlie Kirk. I'll just show this real quick. I just did a search on him and empathy, and this was a comment by him said, "I can't stand the word empathy. Actually, I think empathy is a made-up New Age term, and it does a lot of damage." So,
so.
uh,
The thing is, though, I actually get why he's saying that, but like my
yeah,
article, he's not explaining why. Just like I didn't explain my article, like my reason. And so the reason is deeper than like a quick statement like that. In a sense, from what I see, especially working with people in mental health that are younger, they are so far gone because empathy
mm-hmm,
has been weaponized,
mm-hmm,
or abused in a way where it's like I mean, not to go in circles, but where it's not accurate to the point where, um, I mean, I do think that in many cases it can be, I can see why someone will call it a dangerous
right,
word.
mm-hmm,
Because look what happened.
yeah.
He was murdered by somebody who, it's already been reported that he was at a dinner saying how Charlie Kirk is evil, and it's because he believes Charlie Kirk has no empathy.
He
Yeah,
actually used that word.
he didn't use the word empathy.
Okay.
I mean, so what I watched this morning, I watched just a news conference, and they were saying that recently the murderer was at a was noted making a comment about how Charlie Kirk is like evil or something along those that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's just inferring though that Charlie, unlike this person, so this person believes they have some sort of empathy or whatever, but then Charlie doesn't and needs to be punished. And I can see this is why when you're like a polarizing figure, which we aren't, I people are nonstop attacking you, and then they're using things like you have no empathy or I have empathy and you don't. So as the reason for your misbehavior towards this person, this is the thing. This is the reason I wrote the article because I saw the Palestinians in Dearborn, Michigan. blatantly, openly talking at a meeting about the kids at the University of Michigan are weak, and if we use their empathy against them, we will take over the campus. They were literally using this kind of
Hmm.
terminology.
They actually use the term empathy or in
Oh,
that.
empathy was used numerous times and
Hmm.
at this conference, which is what made me write the article because
Okay.
I went back to the University of Michigan, which is like 35 minutes away, I think. And so I tried half a dozen times to speak with the president about what I witnessed, because it was really scary to me. I've never,
Hmm.
it was like we weren't in America. And I was ignored and that's fine. I got over it a year later. But my point was this is the kind of reason why
Yeah. Hmm.
people like Charlie Kirk say that, and
Right.
obviously taken out of context. But I'm lucky because you contacted me, so now I can contextualize things easier around this topic because I don't want to be quoted like what Charlie was quoted, which is where I was leaning had you
Hmm.
not messaged me.
Yeah. Well, it's hard rhetorically to have the discussions about empathy with the people you're talking about, let's say the activists, because they're going to shut you down, they're going to ignore you, it's and then it'll become, you know, or they were, sounds like even the administration was ignoring you. And that's where I think the importance of the empathy circle comes in. Is for me, it's like don't trust anybody that won't do an empathy circle with you, right?
Yeah,
You can't trust them because the empathy circle says it says I'm in our center, the empathy center in our bylaws. It's required that if somebody has a conflict and they say I need an empathy circle to talk about this, it's by our bylaws, we're required to sit down and have a dialogue, an empathy circle, a restorative empathy circle to work through the conflict. So it's like the thing is maybe the only thing you can do is like what you're wanting to do is you just start
hmm
your own community of people who do want to have these dialogues and then people who have the same, openness and, willingness to listen and want positive solutions that you kind of form your own, community and then it kind of grows and grows
yeah,
and then and always invite, I always I'm glad to invite the woke and the right woke and the left woke into the circle, but the structure of the circle has to be the form that we have. It's not a debate,
right.
it's that I'm glad to listen to you, on the right or the left, to hear you fully to your satisfaction, but the rules are we want holistic empathy that you will hear me out as well, and you will hear out everyone who's in the circle. And so
Oh,
the circle, the empathy circle is so foundational. It's the core of how we're defining empathy because that's it's sort of the minimal for holistic empathy where we're all listening. We should actually do a empathy circle together so you can really kind of experience it. And so anyway, it's central to a, a starting point. It's a starting point for constructive understanding of what empathy means and using it and doing it. Uh,
Um, question though. So let's say, and we should, so I have a partner, a research partner and a business partner, and I want her to join us because, not now, but sometime soon, because I want her to do this with me. We're both, so we're non-traditional, so we're older than all the other people on the campus. I mean, we're grad students, but
mhm.
so I'm 38, and so, um, I want her to be a part of this with me. So my question is, so in the circle, you said it's not a debate. I picked up on that already, but can I ask questions and say like, well, why do you think that? Um, Or is it just listening, purely listening about someone's experience or their perspective? Or can I challenge
When okay, well I'll review the process. So we have usually four people minimum, can be maybe six, up to six or so, maybe even seven. And then so the idea is to have smaller groups so everyone has a real chance to speak and be heard and to listen to others. And so that, smaller group maximizes sort of the involvement. And in the process, there's the roles. There's a speaker, there's a listen, or there's an active listener, and then there's the silent listeners, and then there's a facilitator. So the facilitator's job is only to hold the process, and you don't even need a facilitator if everyone is really familiar with the process because you just stick with the process. And then there's one speaker, and if we had two other people here and I was the first the speaker, I would speak to you, I'd say a concept, an idea or two, which is usually about 30 seconds, 45 seconds. And then I pause and you reflect back your understanding of what I've said and I check. Did you understand it? And maybe if you didn't quite understand it, I'll say it again in a way until I feel that you really understood what it is that I'm saying to my satisfaction. So it's really for me to feel satisfied that I've been heard and understood. And sometimes, um, we've done empathy circles with, like the folks that were the Identity Europa group. They were the ones that had the khaki t-shirts and tiki torches and
oh,
shirts in Charlottesville. And we
yeah,
had a group of them and we were talking about the Holocaust, right? And they're Holocaust deniers. And one of them just could not say, reflect back, my friend who's Jewish too, was saying, the Holocaust means to me that, half my family in Austria were killed and the other half were spread around the world. And the guy just didn't want to say it, didn't want to say it. And my friend said it like four times,
yeah,
until the other guy that I didn't wrote, but his friend said, just tell him what you heard him say. And he did. He said half your family were killed and the other, half were spread around the world. And so my friend had to feel heard to his satisfaction that you really got what I had to say. And people try to obfuscate or say something else, or they try to put their own stuff in it. You say, no, I didn't say that. I said this until you feel heard. So then we have time limits, turns. So I'll have, as a speaker, I have maybe up to 5 minutes to speak. And then the facilitator just keeps the time, says, okay, your time is up. You finish your thought, maybe in a sentence. You get your final reflection to feel heard. And then you, as the listener, it becomes your turn to be the speaker. And then you select someone else in the circle to speak to. And you can say, oh, I have a question about what Edwin said. And my question is this. When it's your turn to speak, you can say anything. When it's your turn to speak, you can be judgmental. You can say, Edwin's a real asshole. I think he's full of shit. And then your listener would say, well, I hear you say you think Edwin is an asshole and he's full of shit. So,
mm,
or whatever. So you're totally free. It's total free speech. Say anything you want. You can be judgmental, which is not necessarily a very empathic way of speaking, but it's totally about free speech. And then the person you're speaking to would do the same listening to you. And then when your 5 minutes is up, the facilitator says time's up, are finished, and then they become the speaker and they select their listener, and it just goes like that for, I find 2 hours is usually a good amount of time to really get kind of deep,
yeah,
and so everyone in the process feels, heard to their satisfaction, and it's also you can try it for conflict mediation. We use the same thing if people are in conflict. You bring a family conflict, you bring it into an empathy circle, and you can kind of work out. In fact, I think families should be doing it on a regular basis, just for making sure all family members feel heard and understood.
yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how we forget to take time and do these things in all relationships, I think. And I think once people start doing it, they can repair whatever it is that they were going through. I think yeah, like when I see all this violence now, and then constantly this word empathy, and um I just get lost in because I'm like, you're not empathic.
Hmm.
You're the opposite. You're so far from it, but you use the word, and it's affirmed by your therapist, by your parents, by your professors, but because I don't know. I just think that we're all very lost about it. And so the only way to repair is to actively do this, which is what I
Hmm.
plan on doing. It's going to be weird for me to do this at first. It's so not me, but I'm very determined at this point to bring something productive. And especially because I work on these campuses. And now it's just like, where are we going to go from here? You know, the only thing to do at this point is to do this kind of communication where we're proving that we're listening to each other. And I also like the small group thing. I think that, yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I do a lot of work I'm learning quite a bit about um, the psychological backstory of a number of these trans shootings, and this empathic approach is what a lot of them are providing as a narrative, and it's the opposite. It's crime does like masquerading as empathy, and you
People are
know.
doing a shooting and they're doing it out of empathy, they're
Well, they're
saying.
not, I mean, I'm not saying that there was like I'm saying that what led up is this activism empathic approach, meaning like I said, a lot of people today, huge amount of people believe that to be empathic is to actively be doing something. Like instead of just sitting and listening and then interpreting, I mean, you can be empathic and no one would even know. I mean, it's because it's about your ability to choose to listen to somebody and then to put yourself in their experience to the best of your ability, which is never going to be perfect. Um, but what we're seeing with this campus violence and or these like school violence, and you learn that when we get information about this person's life leading up to the crime, this this masquerading empathy, I'm using empathy as well as other things, but I'm saying this is one of them. When really, if they're therapists, many of these people, the trans people all had therapists. Why are they not explaining this to them? Is my question.
What happened with that? I don't like you said there was some
Well,
shootings or something. It
there's a
wasn't.
number of crimes that have happened, shootings where transgender or so and by the way, I don't even believe that they're transgender. I think that this is another thing that's lost in this message of victimhood and oppressor versus oppressed. But it all comes down to this empathic approach to dealing with other people. And what's happening instead of actually learning what empathy is, and I'm saying empathy as well as other things, but let's just
Hmm.
generalize it to empathy. Um, Instead of actually learning what that is, they're just using the term and then to validate their own feelings and then not to care about somebody else or care so little about someone else that that person needs to be punished because I'm empathetic towards marginalization in general, but you don't care about me, so there's a problem here. When really empathy is a one-on-one thing for the most part. I mean, in general, you can be empathic towards um obviously a group of people, I'm sure, but in to learn about it, you really, I think, should do it one-on-one or in that the group setting that you're talking about, which is why I want to bring it to Northwestern for myself
Yeah.
included. I really think I'll get something out of it.
Yeah, I think it could. I'd love this help in any way that I can in terms of taking action. That there's with the empathy circle, you can also say, "What do we do now?" and then have a discussion within the empathy circle, so that the action that comes out of it is sort of a group agreed upon action too, so
Okay.
that it does lead to action. And if you're doing the empathy circle is sort of core to the restorative empathy process, which is if you have a conflict, you have a facilitator that holds an empathy circle like structure, and then you do pre-circles. Well, I'll show you that process. First, if there's a conflict, somebody comes to use the facilitator and says, "I have this conflict with these people, this person. I would like a restorative empathy circle." And then the facilitator listens to them just in a one way. They kind of get a sense of what the conflict is. And then they say, "Who would you like in the restorative empathy circle?" The facilitator then goes to the person might mention two people. I would like them in the circle. The facilitator goes to them and listens to them about how they are about this conflict. And they say, "Who would you like in the restorative empathy circle?" And then they might suggest two other people. And then the facilitator does a pre-circle, listens to them, just like if as you would as a Rogerian therapy, listening, active listening. And then maybe there's five, six, seven people that need to be in this restorative circle. You bring everyone together, and then you sort of use a topic like, well, here was the conflict, the act that happened, and how do you feel right now about that? And then everybody sort of explores that. And then then maybe that goes on for half an hour or an hour, and then they talk about well, what was on your mind when this act happened, and then they could discuss it. And then once people sort of understand each other, you say, what do we do now? What would you like to offer, and what would you like to request from others? And then it's just basic conflict mediation kind of structure, which is based on empathy. And then you come up with a to-do list, and then you go do those. Like, oh, I think that you should do restitution this way. Well, okay, I'll do this, and then you kind of come up with sort of a plan of how you're going to heal the situation, and then you have maybe a follow-up circle to, and so it's a whole community mediation processes that work very similarly. So the empathy is like core in that sense. I guess I was trying to address the action component instead of, hey, I'm going to go shoot somebody as an action. You sit down with the people and you come up and you agree on what kind of an action we can take to heal the situation component. So there is an action component to it.
Um, I think I think one of the ways that I want to pitch this when I get students to do it with me, which like I said, I'll keep you in the loop about everything. But I want to acknowledge that we don't necessarily know what empathy really is. So let's actually go do it, and then we
Mhm.
can experience it together because it's misconception. Absolutely. At least in academia it is. And so and I think that I would like to also discuss the boundaries as well. Before I mean, I feel like we should talk about empathy before we even do the circle with the students, I mean, to kind of understand why we're doing it. Also, the fact that, by the way, this is an off topic, but have you ever thought about how um, there's all this ADHD now in the world? Do you think that has something to do with the fact that people can't listen to each other? I don't know anything about this stuff, but
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, I'm not like a ADHD, haven't really looked into it, but I can imagine that when people don't feel heard and understood, that it creates all kinds of internal, tensions and stuff. So, um, yeah, so that would be one. The one thing I did want to mention, I wouldn't do too much upfront explanation. It's like you could even in the circle, because then it becomes you as the person being the lecturer, right? The
okay.
thing is you want to get people into the circle as soon as possible. You might, you're going to need a little bit, but put the effort, the emphasis on the relationship, everyone being a participant. And you could even have the topic being, what does empathy mean to you? So instead of giving a big lecture about what empathy is, have
Yeah.
people sort of discuss it, and then they're doing it,
Yeah.
and
It's
then
good. Yeah.
yeah. So I really try to. I usually just have just a little bit about what we're doing, the how to, and then let's go do it.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then at the end a little bit of a debrief. How was this process? What just go around. You get everyone has 30 seconds or so to just share how the process was. I mean
Yeah.
that's the standard. I mean you can of course modify it, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it. So I will yeah, I just gotta figure out how to do it appropriately because I'm the camp everything's all weird right now on campuses, obviously, since that just went down in Utah. But I think we'll do it in a classroom setting for starters. I'll
Hmm.
find a professor that is willing to do it. Yeah, we'll see.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just feel like there's so much going on right now where all this, the reason I wanted to like chat was about the violent stuff, just because there's such a misconception about this topic. And it seems mundane to some people, but as someone who's pursuing what I'm pursuing, it's this misconception is really destroying some people, especially younger people.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
um,
and the thing you were saying about maybe we need a different word. The thing is, I'm finding that every word gets twisted. You could say just listening, and someone will make criticisms of that. So it's
I
like
bet.
every word is sort of susceptible to this battle for the control of the world word. The thing is when we ground the empathy circle in a practice, we're sort of combining it with the experience, and I think that's the thing that is the strength is you, yeah you just when people start feeling heard, they start feeling pretty good. It's
Yeah,
people have a visceral sense. Hey, I was really heard and understood in this group, and that's where trust comes from, right? I mean, what is trust is like, hey, I will be heard for who I am
yeah.
in this with by this other person, and that's like develops trust, and with trust it starts a whole positive uh, spiral of values, trust and collaboration and creativity, care. It's like, hey, this person heard real concerns of mine, that they care about me, and that releases oxytocin, all the positive, and creativity comes from that. So like right now, it's like it's in a negative spiral. I mean, the whole country is in this negative, criticism, put downs. Now it's turning into killings. I mean, it's really dangerous. It's growing. It's getting worse. Yeah.
What's really scary to me, though, is that that guy who was murdered, Charlie Kirk, was actually trying to have a dialogue.
Yeah.
Um, his weapon that he had was just talking, and
Hmm.
that's the thing. That's when it starts to scare me, where even though the guy was clearly polarizing and causing a lot of psychological issues because we've built him up to be such a terrifying figure. I mean, millions and millions of people adored that guy, worshipped him. But I'm saying the people that don't are being told he's a danger.
Hmm.
And talking should never be dangerous. And it's
Hmm.
on that. Talking is the solution, and guns are not. They're the opposite. They're the problem. And so I believe so many of these people they're being taught that they're incapable because of the way they're being taught of dialogue. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of sympathy out there, but I think there's very little. I mean, I know there's a lot of empathy, but I'm saying in academia where I work, it's definitely more pity. It's more,
Hmm.
I feel sorry for this person, so I need to like to be charitable to this person, rather than I'm hearing this person's life experience and understanding their perspective is different, but that I can put myself in that person's situation. That's
And they will put it in they'll be in your
right.
situation too, that it's mutual. I think we got to come back. I think that's the problem with the whole therapeutic model is it's not the mutuality. And in fact, I think that empathy circles could be an alternative to the therapeutic. Like therapeutic is really, it's kind of like an emergency listening. People are in really deep distress. They need sort of that emergency, but it's bringing them into a mutual relational empathy. that I think is the healing aspect that doesn't really get addressed in the whole therapeutic world, where they should be learning empathy skills themselves because it's going to help them in all of their relationships. And
Hmm.
in terms of the Charlie Kirk situation, I feel if I could have sat down and had a discussion with them, shown them what an empathy circle is, that we would have been on this. I'm very hopeful that we would have come to some real, mutual understanding because I've done it with a lot of, conservatives in the empathy tent. Once they knew what it was we were really doing, they're very appreciative of it. But they see all the stuff that you're talking about, this, and
Well, and I think that there's this whole world. I am not a part of this. There's this whole online world where these kids, they live in their bedroom, they're not outside playing, they're on the computer talking to people from all over the world, and it's such a negative spiral psychologically that I think that I wonder if that guy who would have killed Charlie Kirk had he even, I mean, I know this is not the topic of our conversation, but I'm saying I think that there's such a psychological toll from social media and from all these
hmm
worlds that there's no ability to have empathy because there's no communication whatsoever. It's just all people finding their people online that they can hate the same people with and
yeah.
be victims of this and victims of that, and it's never really growing in a positive direction.
Yeah, if he would have taken part in some empathy circles, like, at the university, it's just the same thing with suicide. People are like, it's just they're ready to commit suicide and they call a suicide hotline, and all the person does is empathize with them. They hear them out, and it's
Yeah,
that sense of connection with another human being, knowing that they're not alone,
yeah.
that keeps them from killing themselves. And it's just that one little connection. And I think this is the same thing if if that person, the shooter, would have had taken part in an empathy circle, it might have kept them. In fact, that's what I see too in terms of, I mean, crime itself is a lack of empathy, and that, criminals and people who have done crime, seems to me that if they're going to jail, they should be coming out as empathy experts. They should be trained, learning empathy skills.
No.
I mean, and they should be doing empathy circles, 6 hours a day or something, and then come out as highly trained, facilitators.
Actually, me and Forrest, my research partner, she's currently in communication with a number of people in prison. And we want to do some research with inmates. An empathy circle with inmates, I think would be really interesting. I'll keep you posted if we
Yeah,
get access, I mean.
that'd be great. Yeah, well, I'm working on the definition project with Jody Jensen. She's also working on her PhD on kind of aspects of empathy at Brigham Young University. So I'm sure she'd be interested in taking part in an empathy circle, with you and your friend there. So
Wait, what was her name?
Jody Jensen.
All right, hold on one sec. Tell me that name sounds. Okay, this is interesting. It's not Jamie Jensen.
No, it's
Okay. Because there's a Jamie Jensen from BYU that reached out to me about my research. So that's such a small world. Um,
I just put the link in for her LinkedIn. Is
oh, okay.
uh, Yeah, we've met. We meet almost every week for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, just working on the empathy topic. And we recorded all the calls too, so they're all recorded and have been run through AI. So there's reports on them on our definingempathy.com website.
I'll have to go to that. I've got to get some stuff together because the semester is starting now. But I definitely plan on maybe late October doing an empathy circle at Northwestern. So I'll be in touch and you can tell me how, I mean, I would love it if you somehow were involved in that. So I don't know like
Yeah,
what we can do with that, but
glad to support it if you need, ideas and or
we'll have to go through a lot.
material or I mean, first thing is to do a few
Yeah.
yourself, so feel well grounded in the process.
Yeah, I'll definitely do a couple of those first. And yeah, I just feel like we're at a point where this is the only thing I can think of that will bring peace and productivity to these dialogues. It's just so sad what's happening.
Hmm.
Um, Even like I'm so afraid to even look conservative on a campus that it's just because my research is polarizing. I don't know if you ever looked into the stuff that I write about, but it's all about kind of challenging orthodoxies on politically on campus. The students are feeling pressured to say certain things, so we
Hmm.
kind of expose that in as healthily as we can. And so it's like I'm like, should I be afraid to be doing that? I don't know, but this is something that I can actually contribute to, I think, where
Yeah, I
we're
think it's a positive direction. I mean, everything I've seen is it has and it can be built upon too as a foundation. Classrooms, instead of the professor being in charge and intimidating people, if they were doing empathically listening to the students, and you have an empathic listening, the whole class is you have that freedom to say whatever you want. Because if free speech is a big part of the empathy circle,
yeah.
and the and I think that's part of the problem with academia. Academia is putting analysis up front, intellect up front. What really needs to be up front and center is mutual listening as a value, and
Yeah.
so to address this, so it needs to be done, and I'm glad to work with you because I think, to turn this around, and I think, the country, it's a bigger picture of the whole country going into this polarization. And
Well,
uh,
what we'll do is I've got some ideas. We are I would want to write about the experience too so people can see what we're
mm,
doing,
hmm
try and get some sort of snowball effect going here where something in a positive direction because this is just tragic. Um, and it's just all now that there are guns involved, now it's just kids are going to be even more afraid to be honest. And I think at this point, rip off the Band-Aid, let's have some conversations and, see
yeah,
if
I
we
could
can.
imagine, like, oh, there's a university. I'll find it. There is oh, it was at Columbia. They were doing, they call it table talk or something, or
Okay.
table dialogues. Have you heard of that?
No, but what is it?
Oh,
Yeah.
but they're just getting students together to have dialogues.
Yeah.
And I contacted the people there about trying to bring in empathy circles. They haven't really followed up. Maybe they're busy with the start of the semester or something. I don't know. But uh, they have that same intention of bringing people together. But I'd be concerned if you don't have the structure of like the empathy circle, that conversations can quickly devolve, because things are so. But if you have the structure of you can't speak until the other person has been fully heard to their satisfaction, and that you have time limits on how long everyone can speak, because somebody will get up there and just pontificate for the full hour, so. Yeah. So anyway, it's something I could, we could discuss. Maybe I could bring it to UC Berkeley, because we had taught empathy circles at UC Berkeley, and I think, I don't know if I sent you the video. We had the empathy tent that we set up there, and then there
Mm,
was actually a class. They have student-led created classes on empathy. There was one, and we kind of got in contact with them and then taught their whole class out on Sproul Plaza, just everybody sitting out there just learning how to do empathy circles.
mm. Wow. Yeah, it's interesting how I think life experience has brought me to this place where I really value what you're saying, and I did not value this kind of thing even like 5 years ago. Um, but I'm learning in life, especially professionally, all the things I've learned is this is this is the direction we should all be going in. And enough prove you can prove yourself in other parts of your life, but in terms of communication, um, yeah, we need to start listening.
Yeah, I hear real value of the listening part, and I'm really, yeah, glad to work with you on this. So, yeah, let me know any kind of next steps, and I will post this and put your other photograph in it and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, just let me know any next steps and when you have time for an empathy circle, and I'll arrange that with Jody or one of the other people in our community.
Yeah, and I'll have you can meet Forrest, my Forrest Rom, my partner. She'll join because I think it'll be good for her to be a part because we work as a partnership on campus. So I will yeah, let's get that set up whenever,
Hmm.
and then once start things get rolling this semester in the next week or two, I can figure out a time and a professor to do help set up the a time to do an actual circle with students.
Okay, just send me a time and
Yeah.
a couple of times, and we'll set that up. And I would say you need at least an hour and a half, sort of
Okay.
minimum.
All
Okay,
right. Sounds
super
good.
cool. Yeah, thanks for reaching out again. It's a real pleasure to talk to you, and yeah, it gives a bit of hope to see other people out there, trying to create a more positive world.
Yeah, we got to do something with this. So I appreciate you very much. So thank you.
Okay, take care, Kevin. Bye.
Bye.